Hello and welcome back to Mrs. O'Connor's at-home classroom. So today we get to analyze the poem When I Heard the Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman together. So last week you got to try it on your own and I saw some great stuff. And most of you, this poem is great because it's simple enough to analyze independently, but you can really go deep here, especially with our understanding of Walt Whitman from reading the article and responding to the questions. But so we know Walt Whitman kind of rejects traditional education and is a self-taught man. And so going into that, as we analyze the poem, we start with T for title. When I heard the learned astronomer, we can assume that that the speaker of the poem, is Walt Whitman. And when he heard the learned astronomer, that would be his listening to an educated astronomer, perhaps a lecture. So we then move on to the P, which would be paraphrase. So the way that I paraphrase this poem was the speaker, most likely Walt Whitman, attends a lecture on astronomy. He is bored and ill until he escapes to marvel at the stars. In figurative language, I found the most profound instance of figurative language was repetition. So in the first few lines, we see the repetition of listing. He's listing, and we get this monotonous tone. We see the boredom in his speech, especially compared to the flowery language after the tone shift. So, attitude, the tone and the mood. So there are two tones here. We have the pre-shift tone and the post-shift tone. The pre-shift tone is analytical. It's calculated and it's boring. The post-shift tone is mystical and magical. So speaking of shift, the next letter in our analysis acronym is S for shift, and this is where the beauty of this poem lies. We have the juxtaposition of the boredom and even the illness he experiences, disconnected with the lecture's bland words, contrasted against his going out, his escape into, this rising and gliding and mystical experience and learning firsthand. So we revisit the title, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer, and we now kind of understand this as a moment of learning for him, but not from the words of the astronomer that we first assume. This is a moment of learning after he abandons the lecture of the learned astronomer. The last T in the TPFASTT analysis is for theme. I saw the theme here as learning is experience. And any sort of theme that involves the idea of experience, self-teaching, and kind of intuitive learning would definitely work here. So, Whitman is self-taught, like we spoke about earlier. He rejected higher education, and he preaches experience. Go out in nature, go see, feel, and learn. And not all classrooms have four walls, which you are experiencing firsthand now. You are not in the classroom. You are not listening to lectures, well, except for this one. But you have the opportunity to let the world teach you now. You are not stuck in school for however many hours a day. So it's kind of, he's not preaching against the absence of education. He's speaking about taking your education kind of into your own hands. Obviously, as an educator, I think that there's a fine balance to achieve here. I think that you wouldn't know about this poem in the first place if it weren't for this school and this classroom, just like I wouldn't have known about a lot of the poetry that has changed and shaped me without school and without the classroom. So your task for this week is to watch a few videos, a few multimedia interpretations of the poem, and discuss media's role in aiding comprehension, in aiding literary analysis, And then finally, I will introduce you to the prompt. So the prompt here is, what does the poem say about the nature of education and learning? And all you're doing this week is composing 3 different thesis statements. Yes, 3 different thesis statements for the same prompt. A thesis statement, as you well know, is a sentence with the subject and your opinion on the subject. It's the controlling idea of the essay. It's your blueprint for the essay. And the reason I want you to compose 3 different thesis statements is because we are, as sophomores moving into junior year, we are straying away from our formulaic writing. We are taking the training wheels off of our bike, and I want you to experiment with different sentence structure, different communication of ideas. So I want you to write 3 different thesis statements. The first one can be the formula that you've learned, your opinion plus reason 1 plus reason 2. But after that, for the second and third iteration of your thesis statement, I want you to mix it up. And I want you to tell me in fresh language, in sincere language, how you feel and why you feel that way. Obviously, don't use personal pronouns like I and me and my, but communicate your opinion in a refreshing, non-formulaic manner for thesis statement 2 and 3. So my advice for you in your thesis statement composition would be to make a list. Make a list of what the poem says about education. You're not saying what you believe about education. The prompt is asking what Walt Whitman's poem is saying about the nature of education and learning. So the poem says blank about learning. The poem says education is blank. The poem says education takes place when blank. The poem states we learn best by blank. And if you make a list kind of filling in those sentence stems with your understanding of Walt Whitman's communication here, you'll have a few reasons and ideas to choose from in your thesis statements. And then, as always, feel free to contact me with any comments, questions, and or concerns. Happy thesis statement composition.